It was 1945. The war in Europe was over. Hitler was dead. And yet, war still raged on. This is because Japan had brought us, the United States, into the war initially by the attack on Pearl Harbor. And so there was a desire, an understandable desire, to want to see this conflict to the end. However, at the same time, Americans were starting to become weary with the war. So those in power over the military were seeking a way to end the war quickly. During this time, too, our country had been developing atomic weaponry. One of these being the first atomic bomb. And so the thought was that dropping these bombs, or even just the threat of these bombs, would be enough to end the war quickly with as little loss of life, well, loss of American life, as possible. So an ultimatum was presented to Japan, but they refused to surrender. And so it was that 2 bombs were dropped on Japan. One in the city of Hiroshima, the other in the city of Nagasaki. The effects were devastating. Not only were the cities destroyed, but people died afterwards, well after the fact, due to the radiation poisoning from these weapons. And so seeing the sheer destruction from these 2 cities, Japan finally decided to surrender. At this point in time, the full effects of nuclear weapons was not known. But we did know that they would be powerful. We wanted to end the war quickly. We wanted to end it quickly and as painlessly, at least for ourselves, as possible. The result was we opened up a Pandora's box in the world. We had no idea the effect that the radiation would have on the citizens of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, nor that those effects, the effects of that radiation, would last for years to come. We didn't realize that we had paved the way for a nuclear stalemate that we saw in the Cold War. We certainly couldn't have imagined back then the effect that the threat, that the very existence of nuclear weapons would still have in our world today. All that mattered at the time was the quick solution. And it's unfortunate that there were so many consequences from that action. Quick solutions are tempting. On the surface, they seem to fix things, and to fix things quicker. They seem to lead us to the results, the best results that we could possibly have. This temptation is the same temptation that Jesus faced. This is the temptation that the devil, the evil one, is really presenting him in what we see in the gospel today. Because being presented with the entire world as a kingdom, that would have made Jesus' job a lot easier. Because instead of having to go and die for the world in order to save it, Jesus could just declare that all must worship God. And it would be so. All would worship God. And all Jesus would have to do to bring this about is fall down and worship the devil. Now, the evil one's next temptation for Jesus is to have him fall from the top of the temple and let the angels catch him. And this, too, would have been a great aid to Jesus in his mission. Because now, instead of having to go about all these areas, going about all of Galilee and trying to convince people with his words for what Jesus was saying, for what Jesus was doing, for bringing them back to God, for bringing those people back. Now, all Jesus would do is jump down and show a miracle. Because seeing the angels catch him, nobody would doubt who he was. Everyone would know the truth. They would have this event, this sight with their own eyes to prove it. And all it would mean is just testing God a little bit. These temptations would have been an easy, quick way for Jesus to accomplish his mission. And yet he didn't do either of these things, because doing so would have meant turning his back on God. And that would have meant ultimately failing his mission in this world. For those of us who want the quick fix, who want things done now, Jesus' actions should give us great pause. If Jesus had given into temptation, the world would be very different today. We would all be believers. Although, what would we really be believing in? If Jesus didn't take the easy solution, then we should be hard-pressed to take it either. That doesn't mean things won't be harder, because they will. We see that with Jesus' own mission. And it doesn't mean that things won't take longer, because they will too. Many people didn't hear of who Jesus was until after his death, even. Yet, if we want to make the world a better place, we need to follow Jesus' example. And sometimes that slower, harder solution, the not quick path, is the better way to do that. After all, once again, with Jesus, we don't see him taking the quickest way to ensure his mission in this world. So this is something we need to think about in today's world, with everything going on, about the quick solution. Because we've had a lot going on in the world. We've spent the past 2 years in a pandemic. Right now, we've got this crisis with Russia moving in, trying to take over Ukraine. Even here on the local level, here at St. Luke's, we are dealing with a big change in going through our rector search. And if we've learned anything from the past, we know that we don't know where any of these events will lead. I don't think we can even say that we always know the answer when faced with all that's going on in the world, with all that's going on in our lives. Yet we need to have Jesus' patience. We need to be willing to take the longer path. even if it is more difficult. Because oftentimes that path is the better one, not only for ourselves, but for all of the world.